This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We are here for the September 10th Elsie-Jewell Seaside Rural Citizen Advisory Committee meeting. Present, we have Susanna Gladwin and Pam Birmingham, and myself, Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director. So when we met last month, we actually went through our table one, which are the existing policies in both the Elsie-Jewell and the Seaside Rural community plans. And where we ended our meeting last month, the committee was going to think about the issues and opportunities and challenges facing the Elsie-Jewell and Seaside rural planning areas over the next 20 years. And today we're here to work on looking at new policies that we want to recommend be included in these updated community plans. So that's kind of a recap of where we're at.
Thank you.
And then as far as our agenda goes, our next order of business is the review of the meeting summary from March 12th, 2021. And I don't know if everybody can see, but
I have just looked at that, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so Susanna, I don't know if you had a chance to read through that meeting summary as well, and if either of you had any corrections, additions, or deletions.
I do not. I am fine with that.
Can you scroll down? I remember reading it, but it was last week. And I don't remember taking any notes. I don't think. But could you just scroll down, because now I can't see the bottom half. But do you know what I mean? Yeah. Yes.
You're
Thank
fine
you.
adopting those?
I'm good with it.
You're fine accepting the minutes there? Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and as we have no members of the public here, we can skip over the public input section and go right to table 2, which are the new policies that we're going to be talking about today. So when we left off last month, we had added a new policy in terms of ODOT and safety on the highways, and we included adding bicycle lanes along highways 26, 53, 103, and 202. And then we had 2 previous recommended policies that we had put in, one to encourage the preservation of water quality in the lakes in the planning area, and then also public access points onto the Nehalem River, and put in a policy that the county would work to identify and establish public access facilities along the main stem of the Nehalem. So right now we've got 3 new proposed policies, and we have basically 1 hour and 52 minutes to talk about anything else we'd like to add.
Last meeting, we discussed the possibility of, I think it was merging the 2, Seaside Rural and Elsie-Jewell. Did we come to a conclusion on that?
I don't believe that we did. I'd have to go back and re-listen to the meeting, but I don't think we did, Pam.
I don't either, and I've given that some thought, and I can see in some ways they have a lot in common, but in others they really don't. So I'm open to thoughts or suggestions there. Is this the appropriate place to talk about that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Susanna, what are your thoughts?
And then, yeah. Well, I definitely think they should stay separate because, as you say, if there are different issues, and I'm not comfortable sometimes talking about some of the issues because I don't feel that I have the knowledge as I do for the Jewell Elsie area. And I would hope that with time in the future, if these committees go forward, that there would then be the possibility that seaside rural people would step forward and be more proactive. And so I would like to see it separate. I mean, we are combined now, which is okay because they're not people from that area. That's my feeling.
So, Gail, what does that do to our process going forward if we keep them separate?
Really nothing, Pam, because all along you've been working with the recommendations for the two different plans anyway. So it really won't change anything. In fact, you guys
Okay.
are probably doing double the work as all the others because they're just looking at one planning area. So.
Okay.
Personally, I would maybe like to see Arch Cape take it on. I don't know what you think about that. I know in the past, Gail, you said that there's more forestry issues and things that Arch Cape don't contend with, but because of their water systems, I think that a lot of them are knowledgeable about forestry issues because they protect their watershed.
Mhm. I think that's a good
And I
point,
think they would
Suzanne.
be more knowledgeable.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how Southwest would feel about that. I think you raise really good points because the seaside rural area is really affecting their watersheds, um, which is very, very valid. And so for that reason alone, they might be interested in taking it on. I know they're also very preoccupied with development that's happening within the Arch Cape and Falcon Cove Beach area, and that takes up a lot of their attention capacity right now. So I don't know how they would feel about it, but I think it's certainly worth asking. So.
That is a good point.
And I would think
see.
that
Sorry, Susanna, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just want to say, yeah, just that the development in seaside rural, I would think would reflect the development further south also. That's all. What were you going
I
to say,
see.
Pam?
I understand the forestry and water quality issues overlap a lot, but from a property use and lifestyle and things, it's a whole different world down there. It's a coastal, I don't know. I guess we could ask them, Gail, but I think there's a lot of, I think there are still more differences than similarities. I think the only common theme is water quality, forestry and water quality.
Yeah, I know that Southwest Coastal, when it was originally created, was really focused on Arch Cape. And even now, they're still struggling to break out of that Arch Cape mentality and to look, north in their planning area and south in their planning area. And they're still struggling with that concept to an extent. So I don't know how they would look at having to expand their attention even further eastward and taking in things that are very, very unfamiliar to them. Other than driving 26, I bet people don't spend a lot of time in the seaside rural planning area.
Probably not. No.
But
So I'm just reading through
broach the
table one
subject.
again.
Yeah, we'll broach
Okay,
the subject.
thank you. So in policy one, I'm just rereading policy one. Did we really cover all of that last meeting?
So I skimmed through the recording from last month, and it, based on my recollection and my crash refresher, it seems like we had gotten through everything. For the most part, The two of you didn't have very many comments, but we did do some work. There were a couple of new policies or revisions we did. I'm looking for them here. Let's see. Oh, so one was on, this is open space, historic, scenic, and natural area, fish and wildlife policies. There was a lot of discussion and a recommendation that recreational off-road vehicles should be restricted to existing established trails and roads. And then there was also the one with adding fog lines to the list of amenities on the highways in the planning area, 5326-202.
Okay, all right. So the one that just caught,
yeah.
thank you for that.
Can I make?
Go ahead, Susanna.
That I would like to change the wording on the off-road recreational vehicles. That because the initial thing is farmers and sometimes timber owners use those recreational off-road vehicles. I would say off-road, not just vehicles. I don't know what you would call an ATV, all-terrain vehicle, the little guys.
Oh, I call it off-road. Are you looking for clarification?
Well, the vehicle. I don't know if they would be considered vehicles, I guess. But to delineate recreational use of off-road ambulatory, no, not ambulatory, no, but I wouldn't limit it to vehicles. Yes, yes, because motorcycles I would include and make it that for recreational use, they are restricted to established trails and roads.
So
because the way it's worded now, yeah, but the way it's worded now, it could be you're saying that these vehicles are to be restricted, and if you're using them for farm or forestry, they wouldn't be on necessarily established trails and roads. Am I being clear? I'm not sure if I'm being clear. Should I restate that? So off-road vehicles or motorized things that are used for recreation should be restricted. Does that make sense?
Motorized recreational vehicles shall be restricted.
No, leave recreational, motorized, and motor. Is a motorcycle a vehicle?
Sure.
I would say so.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so Susanna, I've changed
it
to motorized vehicles that are used for recreation should be restricted to existing established trails and roads.
Yes. And can I comment above about filling lakes and things?
Sure.
DSL has a lot to be said, though. When people say that people just, if you're wealthy, you buy them off, it's kind of true because you can create mitigation someplace else, but that's just my aside. But DSL has a role in all of that, and I know sometimes you refer in other places, other agencies that have roles. I don't know if it's appropriate to comment about DSO, but you yourself, when you're doing any projects, you just automatically contact DSO, correct?
Depending on the
I
project,
mean,
but
does it
yeah,
need to be? Yeah.
so we're looking at the policy that's just above the off-road vehicles. Is that correct, Susanna?
Yeah.
It says mining, dredging, or removal of gravel or similar materials from streams and other surface water shall be strictly controlled to prevent adverse alteration to flow characteristics, siltation and pollution, and destruction or disruption of spawning areas. And so are you looking to add language
Yes.
that would
I mean,
defer to
I
state
don't
agencies?
know
Or
whether they need to be notified. I don't know if it's needed or not. I like the wording that's there. That's a planning thing, Gail. I like that wording. I just put that in. I mean,
Yeah, I
I
think
just
that's
wanted to
out of our
bring it up.
jurisdiction. Okay.
so do
Gail,
you want
just so
to?
I'm clear,
Mhm.
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Pam.
Well, just so I'm clear, I mean, I know we weren't supposed to talk anymore about things under the Oregon Forest Practices Act, or that we can't really comment or make recommendations or aspirational goals for things out of our jurisdiction. Is that correct?
You can certainly make any recommendation that you want. I would caveat that, though, that there are things that the county will not be able to implement simply because we don't have the authority. I think that there are also some parameters that the board has talked about in terms of making sure that our comprehensive plan remains focused, as it should be, on land use, because the land use and the comprehensive plan is the basis for our zoning regulations. So there are buffer walls on each side that keep us in our lane, but you are certainly that at no point has anyone given the direction that people should not talk or say certain things, but you make recommendations with the knowledge that they may not get adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I also, and Pam,
Mm-hmm.
the Forest Practices Act covers forest lands, but there's all the areas that are out of F80 that would not be subjected to Forest Practices Act, I believe. Is that right, Gail? And so therefore,
No,
there's a lot of.
I don't think the Forest Practices Act is linked with zoning.
That's correct, Pam. It's linked to the timber activities, harvesting, planting, the spraying, the road construction, anything associated with the raising and harvesting and selling of timber.
So, Susanna, if you had, say you had 10 acres, I don't know, somewhere zoned residential, and it was forested and you decided to harvest it, even though it was zoned RA2 or RA5, regardless of the zoning, you would have to follow the Forest Practices Act for any forestry activity. Does that make sense, Susanna?
Yes, I'm sorry. I did misspeak.
Okay.
Yes, no, I yes, totally. But what I'm trying to say is that mining, dredging, removal of gravel of materials from streams is not necessarily associated with a forestry thing, and therefore could be totally outside the purview of the Forest Practices Act. Is this a correct thing to say, Gail?
Yeah, because most of it's going to be controlled by Dogami.
Yeah.
And possibly DEQ, ODF might be involved. or ODFW.
Now, I do know from talking to the Department of State Lands, DSL, which they are the ones about fill permits, ultimate ones about protecting waters. Is that right, Gail? I think it was
That's correct.
DSL I talked to.
Yep.
And they said that there's a formula for moving around rocks and gravel, and it has to be a fair amount. And so there is smaller amounts of messing around with waters that could affect spawning areas that wouldn't reach their benchmark or whatever. So I'm good with that. I should be quiet and withdraw any comments. I like the wording. I would just say retain policy.
Okay. I agree. Thank you. I think those things are pretty well monitored by DSL and ODFW and to a degree DEQ. So I agree.
Okay, Pam, when we started our discussion, you had a question, I guess, about one of the policy ones, or maybe a comment.
Well, I just feel like I'm catching up here. Because we have a wee bit of time, I'm still one of the main things I've been hoping to accomplish is rural lands policies allowing either ADUs or some smaller, maybe 1 acre building sites, or so I'm not sure this is the place, but I don't know where else it would be.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's appropriate to bring it up here. So let me give a little background information. In the last legislative session, the Senate Bill 391 was approved, which would allow accessory dwelling units on rural lands, rural residential lands. There are a couple of caveats to that, however. One being there will be minimum lot sizes, and I'm pretty sure it's a 2-acre lot size because the accessory dwelling unit is going to have to hook into the septic system, and so we need the space for not only the septic system but the replacement system in the future. And then the other caveat that is going to slow this process down immensely has to do with the fact that this bill approval was tied to the state identifying a wildfire risk interface area where there's, I guess they want to map out the entire state and these rural residential lands, assess the wildfire risk, and then based on that, either create a set of rules or exclude certain areas that are in high risk areas. So we have the potential for ADUs on rural residential land, but it's not anytime in the near future. And then with regard to the 1 acre lot size, under state statute, where our minimum lot sizes on rural residential land is limited to a minimum of 2 acres. The way you get around that and have smaller lot sizes is you would have to create a rural community area that would have a sewer system. And then you can go down to smaller lots. For example, some of ours are, the smallest ones we have are about 7,500 square feet, but they're all hooked into sewer systems and they're not on septic. So going down to 1 acre is going to be a challenge. It would require lobbying at the state level, and it would be a very big lift.
Okay. All right. Well, we can let that go. Thank you for that review. I knew that Senate bill. I think I had mentioned that to you, but I didn't catch the part. The class I had been in talked about Senate Bill 391, but they did not mention the wildland interface. Who is doing that mapping? Do we know how far down the road that is?
Yeah, so there's two committees that are set up, and we've somewhat been monitoring them. One committee, I think, is looking at the actual mapping itself, and then there's another committee that is looking at creating definitions and things. And the last, I think they have 100 days to complete this, but it's not been going very well. And I think the hang up at this point, from what I've heard, one of the hang ups is that they want to adopt a definition of wildland urban interface that basically says anything that's human made that's in nature. So if you put a fence through the woods on your property, that's a wildland urban interface. And this has become very contentious, especially in parts of eastern Oregon where they're more susceptible to wildfires, and there's a lot of tension around it and concern about government overreach. So I don't know what's going to happen. And the committees are made up of state staff and representatives from the counties, and I'm not sure, firefighters, ODF, bunch of different agency staff.
I can see where that would
Can I
get contentious. Go ahead, Susanna.
Well, I would just like to write down some wording here, because yes, you're right, Pam. I think this is going to be a big deal in the future. So I just didn't write notes quick enough. The wildfire risk mapping is what I wrote down, but that's not the right terminology. What is the mapping called?
I think it is wildfire risk assessment map or something like that. I don't know the exact title myself, Susanna.
Oh, okay. And then under the urban interface, any human, what was that word?
Basically, any
That they're hung
human-made
up on that might be.
structure, any human, I'm really paraphrasing here, but any human-made structure that's in a natural setting, basically.
Okay. Because I think that discussion could affect more our planning area than any other in the county.
Definitely. That's why it's important to me. I would, and again, Gail, I don't know, this may be overreach for our committee, but assuming that down the road this does come to pass and ADUs are allowed, is this the place, or is it appropriate to put some recommended criteria on ADUs, such as shall be built with a metal roof and fire retardant siding, and vegetation shall be kept, so many feet away from the property, things like that?
Yeah, we certainly, under the Senate Bill 391, we have the ability to adopt standards as a community. So we certainly could make recommendations. I think the way that we probably want to couch it to make it palatable to a broad base of community members, I think if we put in wording that says it should be required, I think we'll probably get some pushback. But I think if we say should be encouraged or strongly encouraged, that will probably get broader buy-in from the public.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so I will type that up in 1 second, but I have the definition that they're proposing. So let's see, the definition that is being proposed for wildland urban interface is the geographical area where structures and other human development meets or intermingles with wildland or vegetative fuels. So, I mean, basically, if you have a shed in your garden and you have plants in your garden, technically those are vegetative fuels, and you've got human development intermingling there, which makes your garden a wildland urban interface.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
pretty much the whole county.
yeah, it's everything basically. So that's been
Yeah.
causing a lot of consternation. So that's where my hang. All right, so back to our table 2. So we were going to talk about these are basically I'll call it wildfire proofing architectural standards for ADUs.
Yes, I mean, on a personal note, I'd like to see them required for any structure in a wildland urban interface or new, but let's just start small and say ADUs.
Yeah, strongly encourage. So we do
Well,
already, when somebody does a template test dwelling and comes in and wants to build basically a single family home in a forest resource area, we do already have requirements for them to have spark arresters on the chimney, fire retardant materials. They're required to have that vegetative clearing around so many feet from the house. I think it's 30 feet from the house and structures. So that in some instances it is already required. So
Dale, where would I find that?
it's
That's
going to
something
be,
I should be aware of when I'm talking to potential buyers.
yeah, it's buried in our code. I will find the citation, Pam, and email that to you after our meeting.
Okay, thank you. I would appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay.
no, Gail,
Yes.
I would like it a little stronger for the future because we're looking 20 years down the road if we have more summers like this summer, that on the building code that you just quoted, the spark arrestor stuff is extremely important on venting and things, but I don't think it addresses fireproof roofing, which is the most important. I don't know about siding, but the roofing, I didn't think in your building codes that it was clear enough about fireproof roofing.
I'd have to go back and look at it, Susanna. I don't remember it all exactly off the top of my head.
Uh-huh.
I fairly recently attended a webinar about basically not fireproofing, but making your home and area around it as safe as possible, hardening your home. That's the term. And it was certainly metal roofing. And I think it was a cement board siding, a fairly common siding. It wasn't anything horrendously expensive. But I think it's a cement board, maybe a hardy board. And nothing is fireproof, but it certainly it's not as flammable. So your roofing and your siding are very important. And the other thing that I was surprised at, anywhere you have roof vents or foundation vents or anywhere there's an opening, you use 1/8" or smaller metal mesh, because 1/8" or smaller mesh will not allow flames or sparks, I guess, to get in as easily. I'm in the process of screening around under my deck right now, just had lattice.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd never heard those type of recommendations, Pam.
Any fire spread. So there's quite a bit of science out there that we could put into our suggested standards for building ADUs.
So what we might want to put as our recommendation is encourage the county to develop these standards rather than trying to maybe develop them as part of our recommendation, but that the county should develop hardening. I like that term. Hardening to, let's see, I'm trying to think and write. County strongly encourage the county to develop hardening standards for new construction in wildfire risk areas. And that way we don't necessarily limit to ADUs.
I think that's really the way to go. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, because I think if we were to go down that path and then we can open that up to a much broader segment of the public, and let them give some, because there's probably a lot of good fire knowledge out there. And I know we've got our fire extension guy, I think at OHSU, who's in the area now, and bring in their expertise and let them say these are the things you need, because we have some ideas, but we probably won't hit it all.
So we have a local person now affiliated with OHSU?
Yeah, his name is Aaron Groth, Groth. And we've had a couple of meetings with him just to see how we can work with him and the fire districts and county staff to help do a little bit more educational awareness of wildfires, fires on the beach, burn bans, things like that, and just to help boost our resiliency a bit. But he's very new, he's very excited, very enthusiastic, has lots of ideas. So
I would love contact information for him. This is something I've really been researching, and I've been quite involved and would love to be able to network with him.
Okay, I'll send that over with our template test architectural standards.
Thank you.
Okay, so thinking about our new policies, what other challenges, opportunities, issues do we foresee over the next 20 years?
Well, to me, I keep coming back to climate change and its effects. So we've talked about fire as it relates to land use and humans. So the other is water. I know my well went dry much earlier than it's gone dry before. I saw that Jewell School's well had not been able to keep up with demand, so they were out of water. I like the idea of self-sufficiency, meaning having, and again, this is back to, I guess, building standards in a way, having a residence be required when they're built to put in a holding tank for water. But I'm probably getting off topic here. So I'm trying to think of what's really going to affect our area in the next 20 years. And most of it is due to climate change, which would be fire and water. Susanna, your thoughts?
I totally agree with you, Pam. The water issue is to me, the defining issue for development in our areas. I think that having adequate water for further development is really a big deal. And I would like to, they were studying gray water usage, because in the past, and I know this is probably EPA and septic systems, but I'm wondering what's now happening with that. Years ago, they wanted to say you can have a gray water system without requiring a whole different septic system, because it had been a gray water system is still wastewater and therefore needs its own septic system. And they were going to work hard on it. I don't know where that's at, but definitely the development of water catchment systems, gray water systems. But the trouble with water catchment, that's dependent on rain, and it's all well and good when we're raining, but you know, it would have been worthless this summer. But the gray water, being able to recycle gray water is a really big deal. And also there are composting toilets, ways that you can have a much lower water use for toilets, perhaps. Though I know recent toilets now flush on very little. There are some toilets. I mean, there was through California a lot of things about low flow shower heads. So the only way we can have future development possibly is to have a less of a how do you say it? The amount you need for water flow to develop a property. There's a term for that, Gail, in your planning.
I don't know.
How many gallons?
Gallons per day. We require 250
Right,
gallons.
but it's accessible to the property.
Right.
How would you say it?
Available to serve the
Uh-huh.
property.
And I know right now I'm have the ability to go into Astoria and have a house there to take a shower and do laundry, but I'm do my usual barely any water for washing dishes and rarely flushing my toilet. And I'm a single person, so because I'm not my tank. I have a big tank. I have water in it, but I'm barely using it. So my rental house has all the water, and they're just barely making it. So um, I just the whole water. How can we envision future development in our area with less water?
Because we still hopefully will get winter rain, the metal roof is really the way to go, because not only is it fire resistant, but you catch your water. There's a company called Oregon Rain Harvest, and it is legal under Oregon Building Code and Oregon Plumbing Code to use rainwater now for domestic use. So you put in a 5,000 gallon tank, you catch all the rain off the roof. You still have your spring or your well, but like me, my well is dry, but I still have all this water stored that I can use during the dry months. I don't know if that makes sense, but to me, it's just a complete no-brainer to put on a metal roof and catch all the rain you can into a tank. And when your well runs dry or your spring runs dry, you have that backup. And you also have that, I was just talking to one of the guys on the fire department, telling them that I have a tank specifically set aside for firefighting for water with a nice big opening that they could get their pump into. So, sorry, I don't know, Gail. I think we're probably getting off topic, but the water usage is really important.
So there may be a way that we can perhaps tie this in. I'm trying to think. Part of it could tie into goal 7, within your community plans, you have natural hazard goals and things like that. We could possibly tie some language in that way by encouraging water storage, holding tanks, and catchment systems for use for emergency uses. So that's one area we can maybe tie it in. And then I'm trying to think, we do have a public services goal, which I believe is goal 11. And then it might tie into there, but then we also had some discussion about water quality in goal 5, and we may be able to work some language in there as well that would encourage the use of catchment systems and storage tanks.
Okay, thank you. When the county requires for building, you require 250 gallons a day.
Right.
What if somebody had, say I was coming to you with a building permit and I was going to put in a 5,000 gallon storage tank, plus put in a well or have a spring or something. Would that storage capacity be part of that calculation? Gail?
Sorry,
Are
had
you
myself
there?
on mute. Yeah, I had myself on mute.
Oh,
Yeah, so
okay.
yeah, so it would count, and we recently did, I say recently, but two years ago we did a rain catchment system for a house down in Falcon Cove Beach. So it can be done. It takes a lot of calculations, and as you pointed out, there are a lot of state formulas and rules that you have to follow to get a rain catchment system permitted, but it can be done. And I frankly think our 250 gallons per day is pretty high. When I worked in Florida, we started with a 250 gallon per day requirement, and then we worked with our utilities commission to find out what actual usage was, and it was much lower. It was probably around 110 gallons per day. So I think we're high on our requirement, but I haven't done any research to see what the actual usage is.
Yeah, that seems really high. My well produces 24 gallons a day, and that's basically what I live on. I wouldn't suggest everybody try and live on 24 gallons a day, but 250 seems really high. But, okay. Well, thank you for thinking about that and the different goals that it would apply to.
You're welcome.
And I would like to link it to, is it facilities? I think they use that terminology for each toilet, washing machine, bathroom, etc. Is that the right word, facility?
I don't know.
I know,
I'm not sure what you're asking,
for
Susanna.
development in the city of Astoria, because I was looking into something that for developing an area and sizing it to the water feed lines, you had to lay out how many facilities per house. Well, I don't know. I'm trying to remember if that's the right word the word that they used. For each toilet, each shower,
Fixtures.
washing machine, fixtures. Oh, okay. That I would like to see the water use linked to fixtures. So that if you wanted to have an ADU with just one bathroom or a small house, that the water use, the development of that property is linked to fixtures.
Okay, so that's going to be something that we're not going to have any control over, Susanna, because the county doesn't run any water districts. So we aren't going to have any say in how the water districts or the cities calculate their
No, but
requirements.
no, that's not what I mean. What I'm saying is that countywide, that how many gallons per day requirement is linked with the building permit for the building, so that if you have just one bathroom, that, and so many square feet per se, or how many, that you have a much less water requirement, a much lower water requirement.
Okay, so I
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying now. I understand what your intent is. I'm looking at it from viewpoint of staff and having to try and do all that, and then when people illegally add a bathroom and now they don't have sufficient water or something like that, that makes me a little nervous. But
We used to see the same thing with septics. The old septic records would say, for a one-bedroom house or a two-bedroom house. And like you just mentioned, Gail, people would add on or do things. And so now I think you put in a minimum of 1,000-gallon tank. And I think that's good for up to 4 bedrooms. So I think DEQ at some point got away from a static number of toilets or showers, just because people do make changes. Living situations aren't static and people do add on. So I agree, Susanna, that's a good point, and it might make ADUs a little more doable, but I don't think we want to tie it too much to one number like that, because people will add on or things will change. Maybe a cap of no more than 2 bathrooms or something.
I don't know how we're going to do that either. And, a lot of people have 2.5, 3, 4. You're in real estate, Pam. You see the number of bathrooms, 5 bedrooms, 5 baths.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking in terms of ADUs. Usually those are required to be much smaller than the main dwelling. So my mind was going with ADUs. But again, like you said, Gail, the county doesn't do the calculation. Susanna, I don't know if that's something we can dictate or not. Could we, I don't know if you'd like the idea, Susanna, of getting something in there that's somewhat vague, like developments of ADUs shall not consume more water than available. I know that sounds really flaky, but Gail, you're the magic with words. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way our process works, if you were to come in to build a house or an ADU, we're going to require the water provider to sign a form that says there is water available to serve the property. So we can't control consumption. So a policy that looks at trying to encourage ADUs to use less water than the main house probably would happen anyway because it's smaller, but we can't really, we're not going to monitor people's water bills every month and check their usage and read their meters. So it's going to be really hard for the county to enforce something like that. I think what we could do is just maybe put in a policy that says the county should review its daily water usage standards to see, to verify conformity with reality or something along those lines. Because I think that's the thing that we would have control over.
I like that. Are you okay with that, Susanna, realizing that it's not exactly what you wanted, but it will get us a step closer to what you'd like?
Well, I find it problematic. For example, with now, I could not have houses on my property here because the flows are not adequate. But for the 90 years these houses have been here, obviously people have managed with the water that they have. This is just to say that I think further development in this area is going to be really restricted by the water requirements. And if the water master really gets stricter about water usage that people don't have water rights to, this area is really going to be hurting. I don't think it would happen because there would be such a public pushback. But I do think that linking facilities, how many bathrooms, how many showers, etc., and maybe bedrooms or square footage of a house to a level of water usage is a good idea. So if you wanted to do a McMansion where you have short-term rentals, you know, because even if you live in the house and you rent out all the other bedrooms and have all that water usage, you would not be permitted to do it in an area without a high water flow. And as I said, I think that if we're going to have any future development out here outside of the systems, and I don't know how they're doing the Elderberry water system, the Evergreen Acre, I forgot what they're called. They have the system. Gail, you and I talked about the areas out here that have the systems. I mean, we
Correct.
know now dual water system is not being able to meet it, and I don't know how the other two systems are doing. I haven't heard anything lately because I have friends on the systems, um, but yeah, I just think for linking the development, we have to solve this water usage thing. And if a house puts in more bathrooms that they were not done legally, and if they run out of water, they're using too much water, and they don't have the water, that's a situation they've created themselves. But the septic to me is very different. If suddenly you have an undersized septic for what's going into it, you are then potentially creating contamination, which is the whole reason for septic and sewer systems, is to deal with that. This way, you don't contaminate by limiting water to fixtures. You're not going to contaminate. You're just going to run out of water, though we all are running out of water anyway. So, but I'm like you, Pam. I can live off a very small amount of water.
Right. So anything you can put in there, Gail, that you think is appropriate. I know we can't change building codes, but anything you can put in there would be appreciated.
Okay. Yeah, I think if we keep it to what we have control over, which would be the standard we require for daily water availability, that by lowering it, it reduces what I would call demand that districts have to reserve. They have their own internal numbers, but here we're looking at, you know, because the county requires 250, then that, and maybe the water district only requires so much other, but That I think that would be the thing that we could look at, and maybe by lowering it and putting a lower number in people's heads, it might maybe spur them to conserve more. But our service standard is the one that we can control, and it's tied directly to land use. So
Okay, I like that. I think it probably should be lowered. I don't know when that 250 threshold was established, but so all the new buildings have the low flow shower heads and low flow flush toilets. So hopefully we can lower that 250. So thank you for that. Are you okay with that, Susanna?
Yeah, I'm just curious, what is the GPD requirements? What GBT mean,
gallons per day.
Gail?
Gallons per day.
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay. Yes. I mean,
Other
this is
than in doing,
just something that
go
is a work in progress.
yes, at many
ahead.
levels, locally and at the state. Gail, is there anything else we can talk about that you can think of to encourage ADUs and fire preparedness kind of simultaneously?
Off the top of my head, no. I'd have to think about it more, but nothing immediately pops into my head. As we talked about vegetative clearing, we talked about architectural hardening. We've touched on the use of storage and holding tanks and rain catchment systems to make sure there's an emergency source of water available. I mean, other than just not building in an area where you're prone to wildfires, I mean, that's a lot of what you can do.
Right. And I just emailed you the wildfire toolkit from that class I attended, Gail.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
A lot of it is for the Siskiyous because that's where it originated. But when you get down, there's a section on hardening your home. And that's about the roofing and the siding and the mesh and things like that.
Okay.
I'd like to see us remove as many barriers as we can within our jurisdiction to ADUs in the rural or the resource zones. So whatever steps we can take to do that, such as addressing wildfire concerns right from the beginning, removing that objection before it even arises. I think that's my big goal, is to look forward and remove barriers and objections.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of things that we can do. It's really waiting until the state gets its act together, because I think there's
Right.
a lot of support within the county for that bill and to be able to do the ADUs. But the bill very clearly says also that you cannot use these as short-term rentals, which I think is a wonderful thing.
Me too.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think what else. I mean, we have, you could maybe look at parking standards. We would require 2 parking spaces. So, we could look at maybe creating a different parking standard or eliminating parking requirement for ADUs.
I don't know if that is as important. I know Portland has just changed that and actually eliminated the parking requirement for ADUs, which made a big difference within Portland. But here we're talking about 2-acre minimum, basically. Although I guess we have some grandfathered in places that are smaller. There is no off-street parking, though.
Can I
I
say
mean, it's
something?
not like a city. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I know Astoria, everybody's subjected to that. No off-street parking for ADUs, I believe, because the city of Astoria has adopted that. Out here, though, people are very car dependent. It's problematic because way back the beginning of the meeting where you had about bicycle lanes, I inwardly cringe at the idea that people that are not local would be encouraged to bicycle on Highway 103. Somehow the word is out, don't bicycle on 103, because no longer do I see people bicycling like they used to. There is no shoulder on much of Highway 103. Highway 1 is extremely dangerous for bicycle riding. And I do know that local people who don't have a driver's permit will bicycle, but they know the roads, they know the blind areas. Um, but for an ADU, either they need somehow to get around. I would like to see local transport, more local transport, bus, something that would go up, say Highway 103, and maybe a few off-street county roads. But um, the trouble with ADUs, if it's like the city of Astoria, there's so many requirements where you could not develop a small house in a lot of places. I'm trying to remember all the requirements, but the owner has to live in the main house, I believe. Um, can't remember them all, but I would love to see just the ability to develop small houses with a small footprint, with our own definition, without linking it to the definition of an ADU. If
Well,
it
I
could
think.
work out. The other thing too is I want to go back to gray water systems. I think that really needs to be researched. How can that amount of water that the gallons per day, how it could be offset with a gray water system, so that you could recycle gray water through the toilet. Um,
Is that something
and
we
gray
can
water.
comment on, Gail? Sorry, Suzanne. I'm just wondering if is that something we can put in there, that we would encourage that?
I mean, we can, like I said, we can recommend anything. The concern I have is we want to make sure that we're focused on land use, and we're getting a little bit off that land use path. And so I just want to make sure we stay tied to our land use issues. I'm not sure about, you know, we don't have any minimum house sizes right now. So I mean, if people want to build a 30 square foot house, as long as it has a cooking area and a bathroom and a sleeping area, I mean, they can build a really tiny house. So, we don't have any restrictions in place like that. I think if we get to the point where we're going to want to encourage specific type of fixtures or things like that, I don't know that that's going to garner a lot of support. The board likes to keep a lot of options open for people. So the more we narrowly focus on recommending very specific items, I think the higher our chances are of not having our policies accepted. Does that kind of answer your question in a roundabout way?
Yes, thank you. Susanna, I will leave it to you. I don't, well, okay, so trying to find compromise here, middle ground. Something like the
Well,
county
can I?
shall encourage. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to address the land use thing. I mean, part of the, hold on here, I put something on pause. Oh, let me take off my thing. Hold on. Sorry about that. I'm so sorry. I had something on pause and it ran out of the record time. So, under our goals, we do have housing, hazards. I mean, the lack of water is kind of a hazard, but for housing, which I don't know if we're looking at those goals going forward. Are we going into those goals too right now, Gail? It seems like that's what we're discussing, correct? We can discuss all goals.
Yeah, we can certainly discuss all goals because the way the community plans are structured, they start out with a very general set of policies related to the geography of the planning area that basically says where you've got this type of geography, we would, these are the preferred uses or the best uses for that type of geography. But then the plans also go it basically into each goal and say, okay, like for, let me pick one, farm use, goal 3, we would have very specific policies that could be tailored to the Elsie-Jewell and the seaside rural planning areas. So kind of distilling down from the broader countywide view to really more specific policies related to your particular planning area. So yeah, we'll touch on all of the goals. It just won't be in the big plan. It's
Mhm.
going to be in your community plan.
Because this whole thing about gallons per day, and I still think linking it to fixtures is a very simple way. If you want a big house, you have your 250 gallons per day. If you want to have a small house with very few fixtures, then you have a much less water demand. To me, that's fairly simple and doesn't um, inhibit development that we have right now at 250 gallons per day, but it opens the door um, for future development. And to say right now we can't really talk about gray water because we don't know enough, but just to have in there to research gray water possibilities. Or at least I haven't looked into any new research at all on gray water possibilities.
So are you envisioning, Susanna, that the county would take on that project and eventually build a treatment system that would then distribute gray water out to certain parts of the community for use?
No, that's within a household that you can you can see in the past, and I don't know right now, for the wastewater of a house, it all had to go into a septic system. And if you were to separate gray water, so it's not your kitchen sink should go in your septic system because it has food contaminants. But your shower, your washing machines, your toilet, and the bathroom sink, people will say it should be able to be separated out into a gray water system that is reusable. And parts of California may be doing this. I don't know. But in the past in Oregon, you could not legally separate out a gray water system without having its own treatment, which at that time was a full septic tank drain field. And they were really doing pushback the last time we were in a bad drought, there was a lot of pushback in Oregon to change that, where you could separate out the drains in your house into a gray water system and what goes into the septic system.
That's fairly common
That need,
in other places. It generally happens when the home is constructed, that the shower and in some areas the kitchen sink, without a garbage disposal, those lines are plumbed to then flush the toilets or run out to a garden. Either of those are acceptable in other places, so that your
Pam,
yes.
when you say other places, it is okay in Oregon, in other places to do this?
No, New Zealand. We were able
Okay.
to take our gray water out for watering the garden or flushing the toilet when we built our house there. So it's not new science or anything new. It is allowable, and it almost seems silly to be using fresh, treated, pure water to flush a toilet. But again, I think this may be out of the scope of our things, and I know you don't want to let this idea go, Susanna. So Gail, as a way forward, could we consider something in there that under water availability, looking forward for the next 20 years, that the county shall encourage, I don't know, new innovation or concepts, including gray water including but not limited to gray water recycling. Do you think that'd be okay to put in there, and that would at least get Susanna's concern, which I agree with, addressed?
Mm-hmm. So if I understand correct, Susanna, is that allowed now in the state or not?
I don't know. I haven't heard, so I'm thinking not. I know in California, because they have faced drought so much, that in the past they have really done research into this. And I'm assuming right now, with California being in such a huge drought, that they are pushing it even more. But I don't know the legalities, how much is permitted. Um, those I don't know. That's why I see it in the next 20 years as a real possibility, and I would like the county to be kind of right there with it when it will happen. Because the EPA does septic, that I think it would need to be a statewide EPA ruling about allowing gray water.
So I
And
just
I could look
Googled
into
that.
it, or
Well, I just Googled that,
uh
and what I came up with under the DEQ, gray water reuse was legalized in Oregon in 2012. All
oh,
gray
okay.
water systems require a permit from Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. And then it goes on, it says gray water includes wastewater discharged from showers and bathtubs, kitchen sinks, and laundry machines. It does not include kitchen sinks with garbage disposals or toilets or anything contaminated by soiled diapers. So there's a whole website from DEQ on this, and I won't read any more of it. So it's there. The groundwork is in place, Susanna.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Okay, so if we did a policy recommendation that says the county shall encourage new innovation and concepts to conserve and or reduce water usage, including but not limited to gray water, I call it gray water recycling, but we can call it something else.
Yep. that's perfect, I think. I think it opens the door. I mean, yeah, because we don't know what other new technologies will come up in the next 20 years. So I really like that language. Are you okay with that, Susanna?
Well, I'm wondering if would it be appropriate, Gail, to kind of reference that DEQ thing that Pam just brought up to make it seem more acceptable to the county commissioners or planning commission?
So to
You
mention
mean
that,
like parentheses after including but not limited to gray water recycling, and then put in a reference to the statute or whatever it is that legalized it in 2012? Would that legitimize it more, Gail?
Yes.
yeah, we could do that. Let's see. I'm on the DEQ's website now, but we can, yeah, I can find the ORS. Oh, here we go. All
I
right.
haven't found the ORS yet. Did
Oh,
you?
I found the OAR.
Oh,
So, okay. So,
OAR 340.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Good.
All right. Okay, so I added that Oregon administrative rule reference into the thing as well. So,
Okay. I think
Thank
that
you.
does add, shows that we're not just being totally aspirational. It's already, the groundwork is there, it's in place, and we just want to make sure we're encouraging it.
yeah, I think that was a good recommendation there.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can't see anything else right now. How about you, Susanna?
I have trouble sometimes when I can't quickly scroll through everything. Um, I should probably get my other, I have another little thing to use for I can scroll through and have both going on at the same time. Let me see, because I was looking at the goal 1 to 4. Let's see. I have September 7th. I think that was the work session. Oh, I just want to update you on the broadband Jewel thing. It was interesting. I just got outreach from TJ. Shoot, how do you say his last name? Headcock? I'm not sure
Heacock.
his last name.
Heacock.
About
Yeah.
what?
TJ Heacock.
To
Yeah.
use my land as a relay tower from Jewel School for broadband. So we're all talking to you. So the broadband for outreach from Jewel School outward to reach students is underway. I just wanted to say that I have a note here that I've always been uncomfortable on tsunami things, that, and I know the meeting is coming up on that they have the height of tsunami to be, let me back up a little bit. Over the last 10,000 years, most all the tsunamis have been at a certain level, like a 20-footer. But there have only been a very few that have been the really big tsunamis, such as what hit Japan. But Dogami came out after the Japanese tsunami, and because they visited the coast, and they were saying that all over the hillside there were ancient markers that showed other tsunamis that came much higher. The only people that were able to survive in the tsunami evacuation tower with those that climbed up on some towers on the roof. Everybody inside the building were inundated by the tsunami because it was built for the much more common lower level tsunamis. But if you do believe in the clustering of the Cascadia subduction zone events, the big tsunamis come at the end of the clusters more often than early on in the cluster. We are mid to the end of a cluster. We're probably coming to the end of a cluster. So does that mean a higher amount? And I'm sorry, I'm getting off into my nerdy brain over all of this. There was a 1500 earthquake that was better, but it didn't make a tsunami. They think it was a different kind of earthquake that the geologists don't know about yet. So anyway, so I just think that we should not dismiss the really big tsunamis in planning.
Will is that
I'm
going to
waving
affect
my
the
arms.
areas that we're in, Susanna?
Well, but we're seaside rural. Also, speaking from seaside rural, or for seaside rural people.
Okay.
Yeah, you do have a little bit of coastline in the seaside
We
rural
do.
area.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what were your thoughts? I'm sorry, my phone dropped the call and I had to dial back in, so I missed a little of what you said when on the lead into this, Susanna. What did you want to add or consider as a new policy regarding tsunamis?
Well, I'm sure that there is planning around that tsunami hazards are incorporated. Is that right, Gail? Or not?
I'm sorry, say that again, Susanna.
Is there, I'm sorry, my brain hiccuped. On the planning level, do you take into account tsunami areas?
We would look at them as part of our natural hazards mitigation. We don't really have any regulations regarding building in an inundation area. I know that several years ago we tried to get an overlay pass that would have required, basically everybody who bought in an inundation zone to be notified of that, and would have put in some additional requirements, I believe, into the code, but it was never adopted. So, we look at it, but we don't really have any teeth to do anything about it at this point. Does that answer your question?
Right. Yeah, yes, it does. And I would say I think probably present county commissioners wouldn't act on it, would not want to change that. I don't know if that should change, we could put in wording that should that change, I would want to see bigger tsunami included. But I don't think everybody's got their minds there. Be curious after the workshop we're going to be seeing that you put a link, you sent us an email on, Gail?
Yeah, that's
What
our,
comes up on that one?
yep, it's next Thursday at 6
So I'm
p.m.
looking, yeah. So I'm looking at the work session. I did not go into the meeting after that, so I don't know where that was at. But under Goal 1 public participation, they mentioned translation into Spanish or other languages, and definitely Spanish is our dominant non-English population. So I would say definitely I support that. And just to study more ways that people can be notified about things coming without incurring having to mail out to each individual because of mailing costs. And I couldn't say what would be the best way to have the public be notified. So I was that notice. And I know what, and I brought this up before to you, Gail. Under rural communities, and I have this thing, I still think that the Elderberry, I mean, they'll strip along Highway 26, which at least the part that's fed by the Elderberry, I forgot the full name, water system.
Probably some sort of community water system.
Yeah, because there's a whole thing about an OR. I have 66022-010 on unincorporated communities that possibly more stuff could happen in an unincorporated community, that they have more say-so over their lives. And I don't know what everybody thinks about that. Does anybody want to say anything about that? Because then there's another thing I have.
I don't think I have anything to share with that. Thank you.
Nor do I.
I think there was a terminology for I don't know, for one of these things that you needed not only water but septic. And so there is a water system. There are water systems around here, but there's not a common septic system. Therefore, I think they are not an they're unincorporated communities. But I would like to see that changed. That if they so wanted to be an unincorporated community, they could be. Could we look into that some, Gail?
Yeah, so there are very specific requirements that you have to meet to be a rural community or an unincorporated community. And I don't know if Elderberry would even qualify, but certainly if they met all those criteria, they could, we could work with them to do that if that was their desire. I mean, it doesn't do a whole lot, but it allows a little bit more intense development and smaller lot sizes, a little bit more commercial uses. So we'd have to see if they even meet the requirements.
Mm-hmm. There was another thing that came up, and that was under the forestry resource lands. And I don't think the commissioners would go along with this, but under other forest uses, there's a whole definition of forest uses, and that another forest use should be carbon sequestration. And I think because the county commission won't vote for that, hopefully that will come under the state push on climate change resiliency and because forest came up a whole lot on that one. So I'm not sure if it would be any good to bring that up. And hopefully it will come from that. There was another thing under forestry, and I have down policy L. It says forest owners should be encouraged to actively pursue methods of complete utilization of wood fiber left on the ground after harvesting. And I think that's really poor wording because the trick is that it doesn't create fuel for fires, but wood fiber left on the ground can help the ground. If you strip it all off, it really can break down even worse the quality of soil that you have. If you clear cut and you strip off all remaining vegetation or wood fiber, you really will deplete the soils after a generation or two, which we are already beginning to see as they fertilize more heavily to get the tree growth on the faster rotation cycles.
I agree, Susanna.
Another
That's, you know,
thing,
stripping, that is very important, but I don't know if that's something we can even attempt to put in because likely it wouldn't pass the commission. What are your thoughts on that, Gail?
Well, I can't speak for the commission. All I can say is that the parameters that as I have understood them, is you know, we want to leave as many options open as possible and not be too restrictive in our recommendations so that people do have choices available to them. We don't want to make recommendations that will necessarily support one technique or industry or sector of the economy over another. So we want to be as open and inclusive as possible to any and all technologies, whether we may agree with them or not.
Okay, so that language that Susanna
and
just referred to, didn't it say shall encourage removal?
yes, it's actively encourage active methods of complete utilization of wood fiber.
Can we remove that, Gail?
Susanna, what are you reading from?
Yeah.
So these are notes that I took off, and this was what was presented to the county commissioners on the work session September 7th on goal 1 to 4. Now, I had trouble, I don't know what was happening during that work session.
Well, that work session didn't happen. It was moved to the 15th.
Oh, okay. That explains it. I was trying to access it and I didn't know that it had not happened. Okay. But on the information that went out, we discussed in the work session, there was something online on the county commission site for that work session. And because this is something I think that's important to me, that I wrote out the wording, and it's under, all I have down is policy L. And
I'm going to
I
put you
don't know.
guys on mute
So
for
let
a
me
minute.
just. Gail, that's
Hey, you guys, I'm going to
September
put you on
15th.
mute for a minute.
Okay.
Yes, that's fine. So Gail, that's September 15th?
Yeah, it'll be September
That work
15th.
session?
Yeah, September 15th, and it's going to be at Sometime. Hold on. 10 a.m.
Okay. So actually, I guess what I should do is write a comment. But can I, this whole thing about the way county commission now is run drives me crazy. Can I even enter a comment to go into the work product for a work session?
Well, our staff item is already submitted, so it's too late to get into the staff packet. What I would suggest is you can simply email it to all of the Board of Commissioners and do it that way. That way they've at least got your comment.
Uh-huh.
Because there is no public input at the, or public participation at the work sessions.
Uh-huh.
Hey, you guys,
And
I'm going to
I'm bad.
go. I need to
Yeah.
go.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So our next meeting then will be in October. It's going to be October 8th at 10 a.m. And that will be bringing forward kind of a rough draft of the revised plan, Susanna, at the next meeting, so that way you guys can start commenting on the draft of the plans themselves.
Okay. And did we cover everything today then? I guess did we?
I think we did. We completed table 1, table 2. So we'll have 3 more meetings left to start going through the draft of the updated plans. And then if any other thoughts or ideas come to you or Pam, that you want to recommend, then we can put those in there. The goal is to have your group make a formal recommendation on the community plans in December, and then we'll send those plans to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
And that will complete our project.
So my little, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes,
okay,
I
because
can.
my little box, my box fell off. I don't see my little box, but good. So I have a question about, do we need a quorum at some point in time with the new look on all this stuff, or what we've been doing? Is that okay going forward? Because
Yeah, so
do we
that's a
need to
very good
vote on this?
question. In December, you will need to vote. And so that's a very good question. And I'll have to talk to our county council about that. Because technically your board still has 4 members, even though 2 of them haven't been in the meetings the past 2 times. So we will have to check. I would suspect that
And
because you're
what
not the
about
final. Go ahead.
what about Don? Is it Don? I forgot his last name, from the um, Chinook Nation, and his
Yeah,
wife,
Donovan. Yeah, they were appointed as well. You're right. And they've never showed up to a meeting.
because they affect the quorum number, correct?
Yes.
They did. Don was at one meeting, I know.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, we need to find that out. If you could, we have to deal with that. And if when voting, if I mean my concern, if we have a quorum, if we can make sure that Connie and Matt Thamerson show up, that even if Matt voted no, but we have a quorum, things would still go forward, right?
Well, Matt's been removed because he never came to any of the meetings, never responded, never returned a phone call or an email. So the board,
Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I meant Herb Olstead. I'm
Oh, okay.
thinking local loggers. I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I
So
was
it
going to
may
drink some
be,
coffee today. Uh,
it might be, Susanna, that because your committee doesn't make a final decision on this, on the plan, you just make a recommendation, that it may be okay if it's only you and Pam, but I'll double check that. Because what I'm afraid is going to happen is if we need to get Herb and Connie here and Don and his wife, and they haven't been part of the process, you know, over the past several months now, I don't want to derail it because they want to go back to the beginning and start again because they haven't been involved. That's my concern.
wait. Wait. Um, yes, I think that Don and his Abby is his wife.
I should know this, and Jody.
Oh, Jody. That I don't know if you reach out to the. I mean, I think that if you could send them an email. I mean, talk to um, the attorney or who you were mentioning to see. I know that Don probably wants to have his input in there, and I don't know if he understands all the implications of him not being a part of the discussion all this time.
Hmm.
Um, I'm kind of, I mean, for Herb, I don't know. It might be, I don't really know about logging right now. Sometimes they've had it where you could only use equipment till 1 p.m. and sometimes they totally close down the woods altogether. Do you have any idea, Gail, about the
Absolutely not.
status of fire danger?
No, I don't,
Uh-huh.
Susanna.
So, yeah, if Herb is trying to log, because I mean he runs a logging company. If he's trying to log and it's limited to being done by 1 p.m. because it's all about humidity and after 1 p.m. the fire danger goes up more because of lack of humidity. Um, he might just be madly trying to log, and maybe we should have our meetings at 2 p.m. I mean, if it's important to accommodate him, I could do it. I don't know about you. And it would only go on as long as these fire restrictions. And today, Gail, it is a misty rain off and on a teeny bit.
I'm glad to
But
hear that.
it's coming up from the Willamette Valley, so I don't know if the coast for once has got no precipitation. Are you have anything there?
We did this morning, but right now it's looking pretty dry and it's still pretty cloudy, but it's
Actually,
looking a lot
yeah, actually I had to go look at my deck and all the moisture dried off. It's all
drier.
dry looking. So it was like you got in the morning, but still, any little bit helps. We're so
Absolutely.
dry. And, there is beginning to be more and more possibility as we go through September.
Hmm.
Um, just in the thing about the whole logging thing in her, but I, I would, when you reach out to him,
Hmm.
ask him that perhaps, is he having. Oh, I could also ask if you want about if they are permitting logging and if it's a 1 p.m. cutoff and would it work better for him to have it later in the day?
Okay.
Because Connie and Pam and I think are all flexible time-wise. Connie often has so many irons in the fire.
Hmm.
She kind of quit working full time at Job Corps and then she was working more at Job Corps and then she was, I think, doing something else. So it might be that, and then she has a very close kind of partner who lives up at Mist. And so she will go between Hamlet and Mist and Job Corps, which to me is always insane that she can do that
Yeah, it's a lot of travel.
and keep her sanity. And when sometimes she's distracted, um, that I can't believe it that she can do all that. But
Okay, so Susanna, we're almost
anyway,
at noon. Do we have any more business for our
uh-huh.
meeting?
No, I think that I covered my notes
Okay. Well,
that
I
I
have
had,
nothing.
my concern. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to end our recording, and if I don't see you before then, well, you'll be at our September 28th joint meeting with the Planning Commission, so, correct?
Yes. Oh, yes. I need to write that September 28th. Okay.
Yeah, 9 o'clock.
Good. Okay.
All right.
9.
Yep,
Oh, wait a minute. You said 9 o'clock?
9 o'clock.
Okay. So earlier. Okay.
Yep. All right.
Thank
So
you very
you're
much.
welcome. Thank you, Susanna. I'll see you in a couple weeks.